Hi, everyone. It's Anna Monroe here with Ishmael Interactive. Thanks for joining us again this week on the podcast. It's the 20th week of this podcast, which is amazing. I can't believe we've made it this far. And this week, I want to talk about how to do more with less, how increasing efficiency doesn't have to be expensive. So here's the thing. Government agencies across the developed world face a familiar paradox. Despite an unprecedented investment in digital transformation, America alone spends over $100 billion annually on federal IT systems. Public satisfaction with government services remains stubbornly low. The conventional wisdom holds that wholesale modernization is the answer, but the evidence suggests otherwise. That's because large organizations, particularly government agencies, suffer from a peculiar form of institutional sclerosis. Teams operate in silos, communication flows poorly, and problems fester undiagnosed. This organizational quietude creates a vicious cycle. Without regular informal dialogue between staff and customers and between staff and staff, seemingly simple issues become shrouded in mystery and appear to require dramatic intervention. This phenomenon resembles what economists call information asymmetries, but in reverse. Rather than one party hoarding superior knowledge, all parties, managers, frontline staff, and customers, remain ignorant of readily available solutions. The result is a collective misdiagnosis of organizational health happening over and over and over again. Faced with systematic dysfunction, government agencies typically reach for the most expensive tool in the tool shed. That's comprehensive modernization. These initiatives promise to rebuild entire systems from scratch, incorporating the latest technologies, such as artificial intelligence, which is now a requirement basically, and training thousands of employees on new workflows. Such projects exhibit the classic symptoms of what behavioral economists term solution aversion, the tendency to reject problems because the assumed remedies seem too costly or disruptive. Ironically, this leads to solutions that are both costlier and more disruptive than necessary. The modernization impulse also reflects what might be called technological solutionism, which is something that I've come across a lot in my career. And that's the belief that complex organizational problems can be resolved through better software rather than better management. The empirical evidence on government modernization is sobering. A 2025 Government Accountability Office report found that 10 most critical federal legacy IT systems flagged for modernization in 2019, of those 10, only 3 had been successfully completed 6 years later. That's a 70% failure rate, even at for the highest priority projects. Britain faces a similar challenge. The UK's major projects portfolio consists of 125 projects with a combined whole life cost of $448 billion, but a 2020 National Audit Office report found that government programs often encounter difficulties, taking longer and costing more than planned and not delivering the intended aims, with significant and high-profile consequences. These failures share common characteristics. They discard institutional knowledge, they create massive transition costs, and they operate on the assumption that existing processes contain no wisdom worth preserving. The opportunity cost is enormous. Resources devoted to failed modernization could fund hundreds of targeted improvements. Economic theory suggests a more rational approach, and that is treat communication and infrastructure and staff as internal customers requiring market research. And I would add to that in addition to economic theory, good management practice and, in fact, human-centered design suggest the same things. External communications represent the lowest hanging fruit. Research from Nevada's unemployment insurance system demonstrates that behaviorally informed messaging, that means brief, jargon-free, and realistic about timelines, can increase reader comprehension by 5% and efficiency in task completion by 4 to 5 times when compared with the original messaging. This was also found to be true in the IRS's attempts to reduce likely errors in tax filings. The marginal cost of such improvements approaches zero, but the benefits compound indefinitely. Internal communications requires a slightly more sophisticated intervention. Human-centered design research, that is, observation, structured interviews, collaborative problem solving, functions as a market research for internal processes. This methodology builds the trust necessary for staff to reveal inefficiencies they've quietly circumvented and supported for years. Such research invariably uncovers what might be termed the shadow economy of government operations. That is, elaborate workarounds that staff develop to compensate for systematic failures. And I want to be very clear here, the staff is not at fault here. The staff is being incredibly creative and dynamic and flexible in creating these workarounds to support crazy systematic failures. One case study from the General Services Administration found that an employee was spending 4 hours weekly manually entering data because management policies from two different teams meant that data from spreadsheets that needed to be synthesized came to her desk locked down. Another project with the Veterans Health Administration showed that staff regularly had to block off hours of time to correctly enter data because the interface was incredibly clunky and outdated. Again, the staff wasn't at fault. The technology itself couldn't help them. We needed to update the technology to match the staff needs. The economic logic here is compelling. Removing friction from the internal processes allows organizations to deploy human capital more efficiently. Finding the exact right place for those improvements to be made is incredibly cheap if you just talk to people. Staff currently trapped in mundane workarounds can focus on tasks that require judgment, creativity, and institutional knowledge, precisely the activities that justify their employment in the first place, not those workarounds. This reallocation effect generates positive externalities. When capable employees are freed from administrative drudgery, job satisfaction increases, turnover decreases, and institutional memory is preserved, all factors that compound organizational effectiveness over time. The lesson for policymakers is clear. Before embarking on expensive modernization programs, governments should exhaust cheaper alternatives. Better communication and targeted process improvements offer superior returns on investment and wholesale transformation. In an efficiency game, evolution typically trumps revolution.